Thank you so much, Skylar. And I'm actually going to introduce my colleague Joe, our Senior Indigenous Relations Advisor from Islands Trust, to give an opening.
I just got Chloe. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge that our elder Satasia was going to be here to do the welcome and do the opening from Snuneymuxw. And when we look to our elders, and I think today when we look into our elders, we see the number and outstanding commitments that they have in various different roles as Selkwan as their elders. And they're attending various different functions, graduations, openings, welcomes, and commitment to other roles as an elder for various other tasks that our elders are doing across BC or across Canada. And Satasia Geraldine Manson is one of those elders that are called upon when needed. And at this time, she was committed to another event, another sacred event that she is committed to doing, specifically around our sacred lands and our ancestors who have gone before us, and she continues doing that. And I'd like to open us up with a prayer song. Oh, We'd like to thank the Creator for this beautiful day, an opportunity for us to come together to learn about our sacred places, our sacred lands. We thank our elders and our Silkwan who continue to do the work and to guide us. And the prayer was a more of a prayer of a journey in clearing the path for us to work together and continue so we can continue to work together to look after our ancestors and our sacred items, our spiritual things that have a strong belonging to our people. So I'd like to thank the organizers and the people who are working together to bring this information to the people that need to understand and who we are as Como people, First Nations people, in our connection to the lands. And we guide us to continue to work together so we can protect our sacred places, our sacred items, and our sacred people, especially the loved ones that have gone before us, so we can continue to look after them. Haichkasiam, Alma Relations.
Hi, Chika Joe, for that beautiful opening and for sharing your song with us. And of course, hi, Chika to respected Elder Geraldine Satasia for all the important work that she's doing and has been doing for decades. My name's Chloe Straw, and I'm really grateful to be here with you this morning for this educational webinar for those of you working in the Islands Trust area. We're really hoping to provide you with information that's going to help you and help you in supporting your clients. We've got a fabulous panel of presenters today, and I'm so grateful for them for their sharing their time and their expertise with us. Um, we'll start off with my colleague Sonja Zupanec, who's an island planner with Islands Trust and a member of the regional planning team. She's going to kick us off with a virtual tour of our mapping tool, which is called MapIT. Many of you may be familiar with. It's got some new features and recently been relaunched. So Sonja will give us a tour of that, as well as lay out the regulatory landscape. So what you need to know for your clients who are looking to buy in the Islands Trust area. We'll hear then from Travis Lutley, who is the manager of housing and inventory with the province's archaeology branch. Really grateful to Travis for taking the time to talk to us about what heritage conservation looks like in BC and explaining the relevant legislation there. And then we'll hear from Erin MacLennan, who's the Chief Regulatory Officer and a professional archaeologist with LandSong Heritage Consulting, um, working on the islands as a professional archaeologist, and really going to give us that perspective of, what does it look like when you're hiring an archaeologist, the importance of engaging early with First Nations, and really making sure to follow all the steps there. Um, Finally, I'll give a brief presentation about some of the stewardship education resources that Islands Trust provides to newcomers to the Islands Trust area, and as well as some of the really great programs that our Islands Trust Conservancy provides. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Sonja. Thank you so much. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Good morning, everyone. I'm just doing a quick audio check. Chloe, if you can give me a thumbs up, great. I have a finicky headset. So I am very fortunate to have lived and worked on Gabriel Island for the last 18 years, working as a land use planner. In my 25 plus years as a planner, I've probably heard every realtor, buyer, seller, land use planning question imaginable at least once. But working with realtors has always been rewarding because you are often the first conduit helping clients understand a property before they become residents of an island community. So I truly appreciate the opportunity to work with professionals who share in this privilege and the challenge of helping people become responsible stewards of the land they choose to call home. So the Islands Trust is very unique, special purpose, local government, one of a kind in Canada. And we're responsible for the land use planning of over 450 islands and islets and the marine waters between Vancouver Island and the mainland. So we've got a head office in Victoria supporting the Southern Gulf Islands, but I understand this audience is predominantly central. So that would be the office on Salt Spring Island for the Salt Spring area, and the office that we have on Gabriola Island to support you for the Northern Islands, which includes Gabriola, Thetis, Mudge, Gambier, Keats, all the Howe Sound Islands, plus Lasqueti, Denman, and Hornby. So unlike municipalities and regional districts on Vancouver Island, the trust is the only special purpose government in the country with a legislated mandate to preserve and protect the trust area and its unique amenities and the environment for the benefit of present and future generations. So this mandate shapes our land use planning and development regulations across all the islands, which means buyers often encounter considerations that are very different than those that you find in a traditional municipality. So each of our 13 local trust areas throughout our federation has its own official community plan, its own set of zoning bylaws, or land use bylaws as we refer to them. And that regulates what is or isn't permitted in terms of siting, use, density, setbacks, height restrictions, protected areas, etc. So I was asked to just briefly speak to one of a more common question that we receive about short-term vacation rentals in the trust area. And as many of you know, these short-term vacation rentals in British Columbia are regulated. The regulations vary across the British Columbia, but the trust is no exception. So to date, Bowen, Gabriola, and Salt Spring are the only islands that have opted into the provincial short-term rental registry. But each of the other islands as well have their own specific set of regulations of whether or not the use is permitted and how it's permitted. So it's incredibly important to be able to familiarize yourself with our website, to be able to access those regulations quickly, make contacts with our inquiry planners who are available during business hours to help you, and contact us early to confirm what is or isn't permitted on a specific property so that that information is readily available. So I'm going to walk you through our MapIT portal, which is the Islands Trust public-facing self-serve mapping tool. It's the quickest way to learn about a property in the Islands Trust area. And while its functions are very similar to other local government GIS tools that you've probably used, ours provides various island-specific planning and environmental information that can have a significant influence on how the land could be used. So for realtors, this is a valuable self-serve tool for you to allow you to search properties, explore planning and environmental regulations and information, but also create maps that you can share with your clients to help your conversations with them. So we'll do a quick overview of MapIT. We'll highlight some of the key features, demonstrate how it can help you serve your clients. And hopefully, if you have any questions, you can contact our staff or our GIS department as you move forward. So I will just share my screen. And I'll rely on the moderator to interrupt me if there's any time-sensitive questions about this as I go. Okay, so I'm on the Islands Trust website. This is the top toolbar, mapping and resources is where you will go to access our portal, and you'll click on the MapIT button. We have a user guide that is a phenomenal 16-page friendly resource. There's a link to it right here on this landing page. It'll also come up as soon as you click on the MapIT button. You will again have the option to access the user guide here through this hyperlink. And we've also got our email address for support. So you do have to agree to the terms and conditions, and then you can access our portal through this. Okay, so just bear with me while it loads. You are now able to see the extent of the Islands Trust jurisdiction that you are interested in terms of our local trust areas. So this will always come up at this high level, the administrative boundaries, to quickly confirm which of the islands you're working with, which local trust area they fall within. Because some of these, like the Gambier Island Local Trust Area, there are multiple islands, not just Gambier, that fall within that area. So at a very high level, and we'll get to a specific level, I'll just walk through the layers of information quickly that you are able to access. The administrative layers are going to include property features and boundaries, zoning, development permit areas, protected areas, some basic First Nations information, which includes the reserve locations, roads, and then administrative government boundaries. So you just need to make sure that you've clicked on the actual root folder before you want to see these other topics. And so that's important. The ecosystem layers, same thing. We just want to make sure that you've turned on the ecosystem layers in order to access the terrestrial or the marine ecosystems where they're possible to view. The water layers, there's a wealth of information, everything from watersheds to groundwater well locations, which I'll show you when we get to a specific property location. And you can also look at contours and steep slopes across the islands. And then for imagery, you will be able to access a data set of current and historic aerial photography imagery. So that can be very helpful as well to see transitions and changes. So typically you're going to be using either a PID or a actual civic address to search a property. So I'm going to use just a regular old address. And as I start typing, it's going to start to populate whatever is in our database for the Islands Trust area. So in this case, I was typing in 700 North Road. I know where that is. It's on Gabriel Island, even though it doesn't tell me that. There's only one in the whole trust, which surprises me. So when we click on that, it's going to just take a second while it zooms into this area. Oh. Sometimes it takes you there. Other times we need to zoom into the actual area. Okay, so in this case, oh, I've just clicked on a different property. That's okay. So we're in the village of Gabriola Island. This was the property that we were originally looking at. And what you'll see is an information bar that will pop up that'll give you the actual PID number and some basic information about the legal description, whether this is private property, whether this is government land, and the local trust area that we're within. Parcel areas, we often get questions about different sizes that show up based on the survey that you might have from a client's listing versus what shows up in our data set. So we are using the BC assessment data sets, and there might be some deviations for different reasons. So of course, a legal survey is the only way to ascertain a property's size. But for general purposes, this information is useful. And so in order to access more detailed information about this property, what you will have access to, hopefully this summer, if not coming up this fall, will be this button right here called Property Information Report. So you will be able to quickly produce a document, a PDF document that you can share with your client. Right now, this is not a functional tool, so you would just contact us to be able to produce that map for you. But what that would look like is a document like this. And so the 700 North Road label will be created. It will show the property in proximity to a general scale of properties in the vicinity. It will have the civic address, the PID, an assessment class, which regional district it belongs to, which local trust area, as well as the locally elected officials representing the local trust committee that the islands trust. So their names will be in there, and valuation data. So this will be a self-serve option for you starting hopefully this summer. In the meantime, you can contact our GIS department to be able to access that. So I'll just go back to the map. So as you zoom in to this property of interest, as with so many other local government data sets, you're going to start to turn layers off and on and decide which layers you would like to include in a printout, if that's what you're doing, or if you're creating a PDF to email to your clients. So make sure that the root folder is checked if that's the case, so that you can see the different options. And under community planning, we're going to select the zoning and the OCP land use designation. And this is chugging along and not, because I didn't click the root folder. There we go. So the 700 North Road falls within the IN3 zone, which is institutional 3. And we're going to check development permit areas. In this case, we need to open up that root folder to actually choose Gabriola Island because we have multiple islands in that area. And the closest development permit area that shows up is not on the property boundary that we're interested in, but it is in the vicinity. If you're curious what that is, you'll click on the legend and you'll have information to which development permit area that is. In this case, it's riparian. So when you go to our land use bylaw on our website for Gabriola Island, you'll see the list of regulations that are applicable for this DPA, should this be of interest for the property that you have in question. And then other layers of interest that folks want to look at, of course, terrestrial ecosystems. You can look at the legend to determine which ecosystem is represented on the subject properties. In this case, we have a mature forest portion and the rest is cleared. And that correlates well to this property because it's actually the office that I'm currently working out of. Water layers are very popular in terms of density of well locations is often something that folks are interested in as well. So we can pull up the groundwater registered well sites and you can see the density of wells that show up on these properties in the vicinity, of which there are none on our subject property. And in terms of terrain layers, for some properties, this is super helpful to differentiate. I'm just going to turn off the water layers and the ecosystem layers so that it's less busy, so that you can see the contour lines. And then we'll show any steep slope hazard areas that might show up. There's none on the subject property again, but in the vicinity, it's showing that there are some slopes of a certain percentage that have been annotated in the mapping. And then if those were development permit areas, they would show up differently. For those of you that are well-versed in development permit areas, you understand the role of interpreting the guidelines for your clients to ensure that they understand any change in use, any alterations to the land would trigger the need for a special level of permission, which is different than a building permit. So a development permit area has a set of guidelines that are in the bylaw that guide development of any nature based on the purpose of that development permit area, whether it's for ecological purposes or form and character. So I'll just skip back up here. And so printing a map is as simple as selecting the print function at the top toolbar. You can choose the template sort of format, whether it's letter or landscape. You can name this for your client, either the civic address or their name. You can turn it into a JPEG or a PDF, depending on your preferences. We like to show the print area so that you can actually move the map and decide how much of the surrounding area you'd like to show. And then when you select print, it'll chug along to create this document for you that you can then simply attach to your package and send to your clients. So a sample of that while that's working along looks like this. So it'll have the title that you included in the top, any layers that you had selected, plus the legend at the bottom to interpret what the layers that you have chosen to demonstrate for your client, and a scale bar. Okay, so I'm not going to go into too much more detail in terms of the layers and the legend because there's so much more information in this webinar, and your planning office closest to the island that you're supporting, we are available to support you and walk you through this. If need be, you can phone us, email us, send in a request so that we can help support you to use this tool to its maximum functionality. Please do stop in to either the Gabriola office or the Salt Spring office if those are the areas that your clients are interested in. Introduce yourselves to the planners. They are a lovely bunch of folks in all the offices who really are here to ensure that you have access to as much information as possible to support the work that you do. So thank you so much. I hope this is a good introduction to this tool, and stay tuned this summer for some of the upgrades and updates that will support you further. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sonja. We did have one question come in here in the chat that I'm wondering if you could speak to. How are the hazardous areas treated for building or development? It shows as hazardous, but not within a development area.
Right, so that's really just information layers for you to understand that there is some topographical changes that are considered steep. If it's not in a development permit area, then the Islands Trust regulations will be limited in terms of possible setbacks to the crest of a slope, for example. The Regional District of Nanaimo might require, if it's in the Gabriola area, for example, geotech requirements if the slope is over a certain percentage. But a development permit area for steep slopes would be the mechanism by which there would be that additional layer of protection to guide development. So if it's not there, it's more for informational purposes, and then check with the regional district to see if that's going to impact your building permit.
Thank you so much. I know since my office is right next to the front counter here at the Gabriola office that I do hear inquiries with folks coming in and not realizing that their property is in a development permit area. You know, sometimes having lived here for 30 years or so, and it doesn't come up until maybe they're wanting to take down a tree or realizing that there's some extra steps to go through. So really important that that feature is included when you're using the mapping tool. Thank you so much, Sonja. As Skylar mentioned, please continue to enter any questions that you might have into the chat. We are tracking those. We are also going to leave some time for questions at the end of all the presentations. So please keep sending those questions our way. And I'm going to pass pass it over now to Travis from the BC Archaeology branch.
Thanks, Chloe. Just share my screen here. Okay. If anybody can't see that, say something in the chat and let me know. I can't tell. Looks like everybody's seeing it to me, so I'll jump in here. I'm going to be covering a little bit of ground here. Um, Apologies in advance for the rather dry presentation of the slides. It's all text, so I don't have it kind of balanced out with some images or kind of eye rests. At any rate, this is going to be information that we can share after the fact as well. So these slides are kind of developed to be PDF'd and shared as well. So to get started, my name is Travis Lutley. I'm the manager of inventory and housing at the BC Archaeology branch. So my team consists of permitting archaeologists who handle housing-related permitting in a few other sectors, as well as the inventory team who manages the Provincial Heritage Register. Kind of the three big topics that I'll cover today are heritage stewardship, Heritage Conservation Act and permitting, and compliance and stop work orders. Of course, I can field questions about anything that I do discuss, anything that I don't discuss. Some questions I won't be able to answer, but certainly point you in the right direction. And with a lot of these topics, we're going to be taking a lot of very surface, broad discussion points here, because any one of these could be a number of presentations on their own. So I can always follow up after with anybody specifically as well if you want information on any topic. So to get started, heritage stewardship. First Nations have governed and stewarded their cultural heritage since time immemorial and have an ongoing connection to archaeological sites and other sites in the province. Many archaeological sites in BC are culturally important and have important sacred and spiritual value to Indigenous communities. As we are all citizens of BC, we live and work on this land, and heritage stewardship is part of our shared responsibility here. So knowing where you can access archaeological information and what it means is part of accepting that stewardship role. So as realtors, some of the resources that are available to you are archaeological data requests. Some of you may already be familiar with that process. It's a free service provided by the province, available via the link there, which we can provide outside of the presentation as well. And you submit a particular request for a parcel of land, and staff at the archaeological information specialists at the branch take that request, cross-check the parcel with known arc sites, some archaeological potential considerations, and provide clear information on the presence of an archaeological site on a property and what permitting may or may not be required to develop within that site. Another resource is a homeowner's brochure. This is recently developed. I would say it was new, but it's 2024, but maybe in the provincial timescale that still counts as new. So it's kind of a one-pager front and back that gives homeowners and realtors some really concise resources and directs you in to certain other resources not located into that document itself that speak to the same kind of information, where you can go for information, what it means, what you need to consider with permitting. We also share that a lot with a lot of other local governments as well, who have taken it on and distribute it and share it as needed through their own kind of permitting processes or interactions with folks looking to develop a property. Additionally, the archaeology at gov.bc.ca is a great resource. That is our kind of open-ended point of contact for the ARC branch for all questions related to archaeology. How does permitting work? How does the HCA work? If I was doing this, would I need a permit? That kind of stuff. So that's a great place to go if you have a question that doesn't seem to be answered through any of the other opportunities. Our trained staff will circle through those responses and provide you either direction or information. Okay, Heritage Conservation Act permits. The Heritage Conservation Act protects recorded and unrecorded archaeological sites across the province. There are over 57,000 currently recorded sites and many more yet unrecorded. The HCA protects sites across all provincial jurisdiction, including private property. The Archaeology branch regulates the HCA archaeological permitting and manages the archaeological components of the Provincial Heritage Register. I'll just note that the Heritage Conservation Act Transformation Project is a multi-year legislative amendment initiative, and questions about that project or to contact the team, you can reach out to the engage hca@gov.bc.ca email or visit the HCATP website. The links will also be in these slides. That is a separate team from the archaeology branch where I work, so that's why taking any questions and kind of reviewing the information available there is really your best source as opposed to me. So in your work as realtors, you may encounter certain terminology speaking to types of archaeological assessments related to a property. So I'll just cover off some of those specifically and then discuss kind of permitting after that. So there's a certain selection of non-HCA preliminary studies, such as preliminary field reconnaissance or archaeological overview assessments. They consider a property's archaeological potential, Indigenous knowledge and values in a preliminary assessment of a property or broader area. They don't have to be property specific. Such studies often inform land use decisions at a macro level and support any subsequent permitting direction in relation to a specific development or property. They are not regulated by the province and are not a required permit when working within an archaeological site. Undertaking a preliminary study does not authorize ground disturbing activity within an archaeological site. You may also hear the term archaeological impact assessment. That is the preliminary activity authorized by an HCA inspection permit. It is an assessment that involves subsurface testing and is intended to gather information on a site to inform potential development and any related site alterations. In most cases, AIAs cannot be required by the province outside of the boundaries of a recorded site, but they are recommended prior to a project to understand archaeological risk and support project continuity. So there are essentially three types of HCA permits that cover off archaeological work in the province. There is a Section 12.2 inspection permit, as I mentioned, that covers an AIA, which is intended to gather information about a site and its extent. There is a Section 12.2 investigation permit, which is a little bit different, and that's intended to understand a site in detail or conduct research within a site. There is also a Section 12.4 alteration permit. This is the permit that is required when conducting ground disturbing activities within an archaeological site. So just in the broad strokes, the permit process is the same for all three of these permits. And you can require, a certain project can require one or more. That is usually determined by the consideration of what the activity is, or in some cases, what the alteration is and how much we know about that site. Permits are held by consulting archaeologists or proponents, depending on the type of permit. For instance, alteration permits are actually held by a property owner or the person intending to alter the site, while investigation and inspection permits are held by consulting archaeologists, as they are the subject matter experts that hold information gathering permits like this. All permits undergo administrative and technical review by the branch, and then engage or are kind of distributed through consultation with First Nations, and then move to decision review by a statutory decision maker working on behalf of the minister. So those are the three kind of big chunks of permit processes of a permit process. Permits can span years and cover everything from deck installation to multi-phase year infrastructure projects. They can also be amended in pretty much any way during their lifespan. So unlike perhaps some other provincially issued or administered permits, they have a lifespan, they expire, and within that lifespan, the parameters can change. And often those amendments can re-trigger consultation with First Nations as well. Not all amendments do, but some. So often another term you might encounter in your work are CHIPs. Those are cultural heritage inspection permits. Sometimes the name changes a little bit, but essentially they are First Nations cultural permits that are often requested by a First Nation through permit consultation or during project pre-engagement. The province does not require or regulate them, but the archaeology branch often recommends they are obtained from local First Nations when able. CHIPs sit beside HCA permits and often include cultural considerations or requirements, other technical expectations related to archaeological work that may not be captured in the provincial permit itself. Obtaining a CHIP does not mitigate the requirement for HCA permits. You still require those permits, and ground alterations within an archaeological site are not authorized by the issuance of a CHIP. So another element of information that may be relevant and of interest to you and your work is the compliance and enforcement and stop work orders, etc., related to the Heritage Conservation Act. So property owners and developers have a legal responsibility to ensure that archaeological sites are not disturbed without appropriate permits in place. The Natural Resource Officer Service, or NROS, is a provincial agency that ensures compliance with the HCA and conducts investigations into potential violations. Investigations can result in fines or other court-ordered resolutions. So typically, those investigations are initiated through the report of a violation or potential violation by anybody. The NROS processes those reports and then determines what course of action is required there. So one of those outcomes from the reporting of a violation is a potential stop work order. So if the NROS believes a violation of the HCA has occurred on a property, they may request the archaeology branch issue a stop work order, which curtails all ground disturbance on a property or defined area until an investigation by the NROS can be completed. The stop work order lasts for 120 days, and they can be extended or rescinded as well. So HCA permits may be required if they are not already in place for a project to be able to continue. That is something we try and communicate to property owners or developers when we're kind of doing an information exchange about what permitting may be required. And if it's a situation where there is no site on the property, but we are strongly recommending they do an impact assessment prior to development, even though we can't require it, we strongly recommend it and for various circumstances. One of the outcomes could be if they do encounter an archaeological site or material during their work, they are required by law to stop work. This is outside of a stop work order and get necessary permits. It's the same process for a stop work order. If somebody observes a potential violation or impact, the work stops and you have to obtain permits, which means you have to hire all the necessary folks, consulting archaeologists if needed, to undertake that work for you, and your work needs to go into the queue for permitting. So that's why doing that assessment up front is a way to mitigate project risk and certain project considerations and understand the archaeological elements of your property before engaging in that work. Ideally, so planning can adjust to it. Maybe the design of the development is changed to mitigate or lower impacts to the ARC site. All of that stuff becomes available to you as a developer when you do that pre-assessment or if an assessment has already taken place. That's all the information I have, is certainly in slide form to share. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are.
Thank you so much, Travis. We have had a couple of questions come in, but I think we'll wait until after our next presenter. Erin's presentation may well answer some of these questions. So again, please keep those questions coming in, and we will pass it over to Erin now to speak from the perspective of a professional archaeologist. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, you'll probably get a lot of overlap between my presentation and Travis's, and that's just because that's the nature of it. Is that okay? My screen is visible. Okay.
Looks great.
Thank you. So yeah, archaeology in practice. So Travis kind of touched on the regulatory side and the legal implications and permitting and all that kind of stuff. And then what I'll talk about is in practice, what does that look like? And what is a professional archaeologist's role in this whole process. So why archaeology? Because it's everywhere. Travis again kind of pointed to we are all responsible to help protect and preserve the heritage and historic and archaeological sites in this province, and we can all do a small part to help ensure that those things are protected. The data shows that currently there are over 64,000 heritage sites in the province, 57,000 of which are archaeological sites. The other 7,000 are historic places. Archaeological sites are protected under the Heritage Conservation Act, whether or not they have been previously recorded. And that's why the professional archaeologist kind of role in the province exists, is that we're the specialists that will come in and look for those sites and then provide direction and management recommendations and that kind of thing, alongside with First Nations communities and the archaeology branch and the proponent, whoever that may be. Oops. So yes, archaeological assessments in BC, the permits themselves are held by the archaeologists, and we are the ones that are responsible for ensuring that the work complies with the permit conditions. So part of that permit process that Travis was talking about is once a permit is issued, there are a whole bunch of conditions by which we have to adhere. The proponents or the landowners, excuse me, are the ones that are responsible for covering the costs of the work that are required under that permit. So there are different types of assessments. We've got an AOA, an archaeological overview assessment, which is generally a desktop-based assessment. It might be a little bit more information than it will be a little bit more information than what you would get from a data request from the branch. It'll pull on the same types of information, but it will go a little bit more in depth and provide a little bit more site-specific suggestions or recommendations of next steps. A preliminary field reconnaissance is non-permitted as well, and that's usually when a professional archaeologist will come out and look at the property from a visual perspective. There are sites that can be seen on the surface, but most of them cannot. Most of them are under the surface. And in order for us to look under the surface, we need to dig the holes. And in order to dig the holes, we need to have the permits in place. So usually a recommendation coming out of a preliminary field reconnaissance will kind of help inform what type of permitting structure, permitting processes, and that kind of thing that we would recommend going to the archaeology branch to apply for. Especially if we're talking about properties that do have previously recorded archaeological sites on them, we can kind of help put together permitting together that will make sense for that site on that property based on what construction or activities are proposed. And then we get into the permitted works, which are the impact assessment. It's done under a Section 12.2 HCA permit. That's when we will come out, we will do our assessment, we'll do our testing and our recording and collecting the artifacts if they may be present. That's the other thing, is that you cannot collect artifacts without a permit. So if you, in your spare time, or your clients, or whoever it is in your spare time, see an artifact, don't collect it. Leave it where it is. Take lots of pictures. Record a location of where you found it, and then you can send that information to the archaeology branch, to the inventory section, which is under one of Travis's teams that he manages there. And they'll get it entered into the Provincial Heritage Register. A preliminary field reconnaissance, I'm just going to go backwards a little bit, can't tell you if a site is not present. It can tell you if a site is definitely present because we can see it. But without that subsurface testing, we can't say definitively that there isn't a site. So through the 12.2 archaeological impact assessment, we'll take into consideration what your project plans are, what your development plans might be, what types of activities you want to do, and we'll provide you with recommendations from there, one of which may involve a site alteration or additional site mitigation, which may be under the heritage investigation permit or a site alteration permit. And then, of course, as Travis also mentioned, there are also First Nations permits that are required throughout the province, and we're seeing these become more and more popular. And even if there's not permits, there may be specific policies that are to be followed and those kinds of things. So it's always very important that First Nations within whose territory you're working, you are consulting with them early on as well to figure out what requirements they might have for your property or your project. So when is a assessment required? The triggers for archaeological assessments might include that there is already a protected archaeological site recorded on the property, that you need it for non-HCA permits, for example, something through the Water Sustainability Act, for rezoning applications would trigger an assessment, building permits through local governments, or applications to BC lands, for example, lot subdivisions would also trigger an assessment. The province cannot currently require that an archaeological impact assessment take place unless it's a condition of a site alteration permit. However, as all archaeological sites are protected whether or not they are recorded, it is in your best interests to ensure that you do not have an archaeological site on your property before you start any kind of alterations to the ground on that property. Other levels of government might also need them, and then even if it's not required, an assessment might be recommended based on modeled archaeological potential and what we know of the area, Indigenous knowledge or oral histories, previous assessments in the area, or just as a risk management strategy. So archaeological assessments in BC, the process is that they can be done for various reasons, including development planning, risk management, or academic research. The general stages through an AIA, an archaeological impact assessment, include you start off with your permitting, you're applying for your Heritage Conservation Act and your First Nations permits if required. Then the archaeologist will do some background research to look at, and that might be concurrent with that permitting process as well, to look at the area and pull on various pieces of information. Then we would go out and do the field work. We do an on-site assessment. Through that assessment too, we like to work closely with the proponent to kind of really understand what are the impacts to the project area. And if, let's say, we do come across an archaeological site, what are the ways that we can maybe alter the plans, change the plans to minimize impacts to the site as much as possible. Then after the fieldwork is completed, we take any cultural material that may have been collected and take it back to a lab to analyze. That analysis can vary depending on what types of archaeological sites or archaeological materials we're finding. It can include dating analysis. It can include residual analysis to see if there's anything left on, let's say it's a tool and any kind of proteins left. And then after the analysis, we do our site reporting. So we put together a site form package. That information goes off to the inventory section at the archaeology branch, and it is entered into the Provincial Heritage Register. At that time, that's when what we call a Borden number is issued. A Borden number is how we reference archaeological sites in the entire province. It's a grid system created by Borden, Sir Charles Borden, back in the day. Yeah, it's just kind of a grid system to understand where we are in the province. Once that's done, we do an interim report. That report gets drafted and sent to First Nations and the archaeology branch for review. And then once that's all done, it may go into additional permitting. We don't know, like depending on the type, on the results. And then once the project is all done, we do a final report. We send off the artifact collection to a repository, that being usually a museum. In many cases in this area, it's well, I guess there's a couple across the island now, and then the project is closed out. The timelines do vary greatly. It can take from a few weeks to a few years, and that depends on the project size, presence of archaeological materials, and type of archaeological materials or sites, and then the site complexity and any permitting requirements that may come out of that. Okay.
Thank you so much, Erin. I'm just wondering if, before you go on to the next section, if I could just pause you there.
Yeah.
Elder Geraldine has been able to join us. We're really grateful for her making the time at a time when she's so busy with other events requiring her attendance. So if it's all right, I'd like to have her join us now, as she does have another event to join shortly. So Elder Geraldine, we will pass it over to you, and then Erin will pick up on some of the other parts of her presentation, which I think will answer some of the questions that have been coming in through the chat. So thank you so much to Elder Geraldine Manson of Snuneymuxw First Nation. I know that you're very passionate about this subject and have been working for decades on heritage conservation of the Tuwuxwul't-hw people. So I would welcome you to the floor. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon. I'm sorry I'm a bit late, but yes, this topic is very passionate to me, and I hold it very highly when it comes to any of our archaeological sites within Sonja area. I believe one of the things I've been thinking about this morning was in the Western View world, it is called archaeological sites, which is kind of concerning, where, to talk to elders about how could we have developers or anyone, landowners, know that these sites aren't just archaeological sites that hold history. These sites could be a burial ground. These sites could be a village. These sites could be some kind of location that our ancestors have been on and left, leaving evidence behind, whether that's objects, sacred objects, to burial remains. I would like to have a discussion further on to talk about with the Arc Branch or with whomever, even in our leadership, our matriarchal committee, how we are recognized under these archaeological sites, for developers, homeowners, landowners to know that when they come across something that is so ancient and old, some of the sites go back 35 plus years within our territory, and especially with Gabriel on Departure Bay, very, very old sites. And this morning we were honored to recognize and welcome some old objects that have returned back to us from the Chicago Museum. evidence of our ancestors' history and legacy. I guess I would like to be part of further discussions or as another opportunity arises to share the importance of these sites to developers, to even like the realtors, like right now we're sharing information. This is just a touch of the iceberg. To go deeper in, to understand, to even actually visit the site where back in the 2000s, we returned back over 400 of our ancestral remains with their objects back into our community. It is very sometimes discerning to hear that reading some of the reports, even the archaeological reports aren't, back in the days, weren't in depth. They weren't really sharing what the evidence was, what they were, wherever they were working, especially in our territory. We come across one that the report wasn't done well. So I would really like the opportunity to share more on this topic, what I hold and what our community holds when it comes to archaeological sites within our communities. So thank you. Thank you for having this opportunity to share with the realtors what's happening right now and for them to learn a little bit about the history of this. So um, if you, when the time, opportunity comes, I am retired, but I'm not retired only in one position. This position as a matriarch, et cetera, in my community is having me more busier than ever. I do have another meeting to go to, so my hands are up to the organizers of this event discussion of archaeological sites. And I was not, my background in archaeological began in the 70s, where I was introduced hands-on through various archaeologists. And the first one was Don Mitchell. And from then on, it's been in my back pocket and in my heart when I'm working with the ancestors of our land. So, Hajka, thank you.
HKCM, Elder Geraldine, we're so grateful that you were able to join us this morning and with a very powerful message. And absolutely, I hope this is only the beginning of the conversation. We've got lots of thank you and gratitude being expressed to you through the chat, and folks asking how they can connect with you some more. So, so absolutely, we'll be in touch. And thank you for being with us today. Take good care. Um, Erin, thank you so much for taking that pause so that we had the opportunity to hear from Elder Geraldine, and I will let you get back into your presentation.
Okay. No, that was a great great thing to have a pause for. I'm just getting my screens back in order. Okay. So considerations for homeowners and realtors when we're talking about archaeology, archaeological sites, all those kinds of things. We're talking about finding archaeological information, how to find that information. Areas of archaeological potential, what is that? Archaeological site management. So how do we manage for archaeological sites or cultural heritage sites? What is the role of a professional archaeologist, and then kind of just best practices for development of project plans and how to proceed. So finding archaeological information, your first stop should be at the archaeology branch. They do have, as Travis was saying, the service of providing data requests or information submitted from a data request. And that's a good first step. the branch will typically provide kind of high-level information, and the turnaround time can vary depending on how busy they are. I suspect there are kind of ebbs and flows in the real estate kind of buying selling pattern, and the archaeology data requests would probably follow a very similar pattern. So a typical response to a data request would include information of whether or not there is a site on the property, if there's a site within 50 meters of the property, if there's an area of archaeological potential on the property, and then some basic recommendations for next steps. Oftentimes that will recommend going to talk to a professional archaeologist. The location, the website for where you can go and put in that data request, I think will be provided after the webinar. And that is a free service. There is also the professional archaeologist in BC, the BC Association of Professional Archaeologists, BC APA. This is a group of professional archaeologists from various organizations that have kind of signed on to this association, and the website there provides you with a whole list of companies that you can contact, and kind of discusses what is a qualified archaeologist, and that kind of thing. The BCAPA also has a data request service, and I think that location will also be shared after the webinar. That one is for fee, but I think that that's generally a little bit faster, though, again, depending on timelines of what the archaeology branch is managing at that time. Again, they won't provide kind of any specific direction, but will kind of help guide you in the right direction of next steps. And what is archaeological site management? If an archaeological site is going to be impacted by development, a Section 12.4 site alteration permit is required. You must have that permit in hand before you can alter any aspects of a site. The branch may also require, concurrently to that, alongside that, a 12.2 heritage inspection permit to do an archaeological impact assessment. And that kind of depends on what do we know about the site already, and what work has been recommended to be conducted at the site, in addition to what's already been done, perhaps. That might depend on what types of alterations are planned or proposed. Some key factors, again, come into the site size and complexity, type of alterations. High impact activities, of course, are going to need more work because you're altering more of the ground. And then potential requirements might be additional testing. You might do some data recovery excavation. That's when we open up the bigger excavation units, and then into construction monitoring. So that would be when an archaeologist is present on site while construction is happening to kind of help guide the construction crews to ensure that minimal impacts to the site occur. So costs and considerations. The archaeology branch and the BCAPA data requests provide basic site information and preliminary recommendations. Detailed site information is restricted due to the sensitive nature of archaeological resources. So to consult a professional archaeologist is the recommendation if you need site-specific guidance. As Geraldine was saying, some of these sites do include burial places or very sacred places and information. So it's not open to everyone. It is. You do have to have a reason for requesting the information, but that's again all laid out in both of those request processes. Permitting and timelines. Heritage Conservation Act permits can take quite a long time. I'm not sure if there are any kind of housing initiatives at the moment that may reduce those timelines. Maybe that's something that Travis can share with us later. But can take 12 plus months. And then it's very, very important that you engage with an archaeologist early on. If you're unsure, reach out to any of the archaeologists in the BCPA or to the archaeology branch, just to ask as a starting point. The sooner you put all of these steps into place, the sooner you discuss your plans with First Nations communities and with the archaeology branch, the more streamlined your project is going to be, the more successful of not hitting kind of any major roadblocks you will have. And then the costs vary, so it's really hard to give kind of an ultimate, like a general cost, because it's going to depend on, again, it's like complexity and type, any kind of regulatory and permitting requirements, First Nations involvement. At LandSong Heritage Consulting, which is, I should have introduced myself, which is where I work. We always encourage to have First Nations with us to be on site when we're doing those assessments. It depends on the site team, the team size and scope of work, access, logistics, weather conditions, and kind of anything in between and everything in between. Yeah, this is the last slide, I promise. So plan ahead. Plan ahead. If anything I can communicate to you today is plan ahead. To consult an archaeologist early to review the property, to provide kind of next step recommendations, recommend the best approach of what type of assessment to do next. Because the permitting process can take a while, again, that's another reason to start early on. One of the reasons to also be communicating with Indigenous communities or First Nations early on is that permit does go through the referral process through the branch. We've found it's usually more successful if the project knowledge of the project is coming to them from the person that is doing the project rather than from the province, as the first kind of being aware of that project. Avoidance of a site should always be your first option. If you can, avoid the site. If the site is only in the northeast corner of your property and you want to just leave that part alone, that is best. You can build in the southwest. Or using low impact construction methods. And then also using a design that minimizes impacts. Reducing the footprint or overlap with site boundaries, minimizing excavation. So if you can build on slab on grade foundations, or capping the site and then building on top of the fill there, or reusing existing kind of disturbances as well, are some best practices to consider. And that concludes that.
Thank you so much, Erin. That's some really practical, useful information. We have had some questions roll in, and so I do want to take some time to run through some of our stewardship education materials, but I think it's important to get to the questions now. And Travis, I see you coming back on screen. Thank you so much, because I think some of them we might get you to weigh in as well as Sonja, because some of them pertain specifically to the Islands Trust. So I'll jump right into the questions here. Barbara is asking, for places like Fanny Bay, archaeological data requests doesn't show what the First Nation considers archaeological for permits. For example, digging more than 10 inches. Is this the same with the islands? I can ask for archaeological data all the time, but do we have other places, for example, First Nations maps, that we also have to check specifically for the islands?
Sorry, my advice there would be it's kind of a really good place for that First Nations heritage policy to kind of exist to communicate that missing part. There are opportunities for some of that knowledge to be incorporated into our modeling as available through our RAD system. However, it's limited and it's very it's not universal and consistent across the province. So trying to understand what First Nations want to see in terms of that sort of stuff, or what they consider, where they consider the archaeological sites to be and the extent of them. That can be information, if they're willing to share it with you, um, can be obtained directly from them, and or some of those considerations may be present in their policies, which oftentimes are on like a website for a community, but can also be obtained if they're not, if they're willing to share it. So from the province's perspective, we share the information that's in RAD that we have arrived at through permitting and site visits and these other things. There is a missing element there of that Indigenous knowledge that's not always incorporated into that. So certainly reaching out beyond the province, or outside of the province to get that information is going to be your best bet.
Thanks so much. Erin, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I think maybe just kind of on the modeling part of that. So the areas of archaeological potential and how do we know that, determine that through the RAD, remote access to archaeological database. There are different models throughout the province that have been done at different times to different extents, and they're not a reliable determining factor of whether or not is an archaeological site. They're a tool that can be used to kind of help guide and inform, but they should never be really used on their own. But through those kinds of through that modeling plus kind of the previous work that's been had, and yes, the Indigenous knowledge and having those conversations early on, you'll get a much better picture of kind of the holistic landscape, general region and area.
Thank you. Sonja, was there anything you wanted to add? No. Okay, thank you so much. Susan is asking if an ARC report is required by Ellen's Trust, say to comply with a bylaw regarding a waterfront setback and bank stability, how long does it take to have an assessment done? Are there many archaeologists in the area, and what does it cost? So I wonder, Sonja or Erin, if you want to take a stab at that one.
In terms of doing the assessment and how long does it take, and are there archaeologists in the region? Yes, there are definitely archaeologists in the region. Again, the BCAPA website will kind of help show you who is where. I know that the Vancouver Island has had a bit of a decrease in archaeologists in the last little while for some reason, but I think that it is starting to pick back up. I know that our company, for example, is starting to take on some more work in this greater area. Oh, and I live in Langford, by the way. I am also in Vancouver Island, so I'm very well aware of the region. And lost my train of thought. Oh, timelines and costs. So timelines vary on how long it takes to get a permit in the first place before we can go out and do that assessment. Usually the assessment itself, depending on the property size, if it's, kind of a standard, residential lot, a day, maybe, it depends. But then again, if there's an archaeological site that we then encounter, the timelines can vary depending on the site size, the site significance, and what your development plans are.
Okay.
Costs are kind of hard to determine based on all of those factors, but yeah.
Of course. And Susan has just typed in a follow-up here that her question was specific to Mudge Island. I don't know that changes your answer at all, or Sonja, if you have any insights.
I think that's likely logistics of getting someone to Mudge more so than the issues around the assessment.
Maybe I can just speak to the time it takes, that kind of the regulatory component there, which is getting the permit in the first place. So, yeah, as Erin mentioned, and I have to say that was it's like we developed our presentations together because you kind of went into the details that I was just like, that was perfect. So yes, historically, and certainly in some situations, there were still lengthy processing times for permits. There's lots of reasons for that. But I will speak, however, specifically to the housing turnaround time, which is generally for the last year and a half or so has been about a third quicker, if that makes any sense, than standard permitting averages. And right now in 2026, we're working typically within a 6-month window for turnaround. So we've greatly accelerated our processing time for a number of reasons I won't beleaguer the presentation and the group here with, but we're always making improvements there, and it's success and death by 1,000 cuts on those sorts of things. So with that comes the advice that plan ahead. Plan as far ahead as you can. Understand and expect that something may take a little bit longer. And typically, if we're engaging with folks on, like if I'm talking to a proponent about, whatever considerations with their property, make this one of the first things that you consider. Because not only maybe, the variables for permit processing are there, but there is a shortage of archaeologists in the province just across. It's a busy industry. There's always need for more people. So you have to consider that there's not only do you have to get the permit, but you have to find time and people to do the work for you. So planning this stuff ahead of time, understanding your property ahead of time, that's going to save you, or mitigate some of that project risk going forward there too.
Really good message. Thanks, Travis. I believe you spoke about this already, but someone is asking, is there a website that we can find the already known archaeological sites? I believe you mentioned the RAD tool. Are there others?
No, and those tools are not publicly accessible. Archaeological information is treated as highly sensitive and confidential. So uh, even members of the staff at the province, we have to sign information sharing agreements to understand that this information is not transmittable and shareable, and abide by the confidentiality um, expectations there. So First Nations, professional archaeologists, and related staff, and provincial staff at the archaeology branch have access to it. Now we share that information through those data, or some of that information through those data requests. That's the interface that the public or realtors have with that information. And you request information for a specific property that either you own or you are acting as an agent for. And that's why we do share it with a realtor who may be inquiring about a specific parcel. So you're acting as an agent in that capacity. So that's the avenue where we share certain limited information, which is usually restricted to the spatial location of the site in the property, so that you know where in the parcel that site is, so that you can physically understand, that's the key piece of information when we're talking about essentially permitting or not, and where to develop or not, or those sorts of considerations. So that's the specific kind of information we share, and that's the method that we share it through at this time. I should also say that certain permission levels are also there for local governments. So planning offices do or can have access to RAD, and that is essentially a first stop. We hope that it's just a first stop. We're not looking to those people to interpret that information. That's a big missing piece when some folks who have access to that information are looking at it, is that yes, you have information, but you really want to have that subject matter expertise, a consulting archaeologist, a staff member at the branch, looking at that to interpret it, because there's more there than just a polygon. And it relates to information about the site visits, maybe past assessments, where that site is located. There's a lot more information there that you really want that subject matter expert lens to take a look at. So when local governments provide this information, or say, hey, this property has an overlapping arc site or a buffer or something like that, we really want them to point them in the direction of the arc branch or consulting archaeologist to be able to nuance that information, because just knowing that there's a site there is often not enough, and sometimes that can really, set people back, and they go, oh my gosh, what does this mean? What do I do? I can't do anything here, so on and so forth. And it's a lot more nuanced than that. So yeah, that's the ARC data request is your best path to archaeological information on a property.
Thank you. And we have compiled a resource list that Skylar will be sending out to you probably tomorrow. And we've got a link to submitting an ARC data request. So you'll have the direct link there. I just want to confirm, Travis, as someone's asking that realtors can ask for that data even before an offer has been made on a property. So as the representing agent, they can request that. Yeah.
We don't have, that's not something where we'd really be able to track. So, as long as you're
Yeah.
acting as an agent for this, then we share it, and at whatever point in the process, uh, it goes to you. And there's usually a pretty quick turnaround. It really does depend on the volume of data requests that we get. We process thousands and thousands of them in a year, and they're handled by two people who are churning through them every day. But certainly, if there's something of a timely nature, you can flag that in your email. You can ask, you can say, "Hey, here's the situation. We got to." They'll do their best to try and meet those expectations. Otherwise, they do process them in the order they're received.
Thank you so much. We've got some other Islands Trust specific questions, more to do with zoning and stuff, but I'm going to hold that until the end. I do want to show you some of our stewardship resources because this is information that we try to send out to all new landholders in the area. So I'm going to just briefly show a couple of slides, and then we will take a few more questions for those who are able to stay with us. So let me just get set up here. Okay. Taking a minute there. So one of the services that we provide at Islands Trust is we do have a stewardship education program. I'm lucky enough to be the coordinator of that program, so happy to take any questions related to this. And through that program, we actually endeavor to send a mail out to new property holders across the Islands Trust area. So on the slide here, these are just a couple of the resources that get shared in that package that gets mailed out. There's also really good information on stewardship tips for specific ecosystem areas. Um, there is information on invasive plants and native plant gardening. And we also host educational webinars on specific topics. So we had some great sessions this year on climate adaptation, so landscaping that you can do to support climate adaptation, how to build a rain garden on your property. And we record all of these webinars, so they're available on our Stewardship Education webpage as well as on our YouTube channel. We'd invite you to follow our YouTube channel there so that you can watch them. Some really great information. And for folks who are, maybe thinking about relocating to the islands, really great information to give people a sense of what life on the islands is actually like and some of the factors that they need to be thinking about if they're considering buying a property. Um, this is a link to our stewardship education page. I will share that in the resource list that we send out to you. But I also just wanted to mention that we are putting together a new page for our website, specifically designated for realtors and folks looking to relocate to the Islands Trust area. And so I'll show that in just a second, and I would love your feedback on that. So, what resources would you like to have at your fingertips regarding the Islands Trust area when you are working with clients looking to purchase in this area? So I'll share my email and be really happy to get some feedback from you on that. So in addition to the resources, the brochures that we mail out to new folks and the educational webinars, I also wanted to just quickly tell you about the work of Islands Trust Conservancy. So the Islands Trust Conservancy's focus is on protecting special places within the islands because we know that over 65% of the Islands Trust area is privately owned and only about 21% of it is protected. So we also know that the islands are one of 12 priority places for species at risk in Canada and are home to over 300 different species at risk. So this represents nearly 25% of all the endangered species in BC. So, so much at risk if we're not protecting it. So Islands Trust Conservancy works really hard with landowners. And of course, we would love your help as you are often the first point of contact with landholders in this area. Um, to get them to be doing stewardship on their property, protecting natural areas on the land through covenants. We have a NAPTEC program, which is the Natural Area Protection Tax Exemption Program, which can provide property owners with a 65% tax exemption on the land portion of their taxes for putting a protective covenant on title. This NAPTEP is unique to the Islands Trust. It's legislated through the Islands Trust Act and currently protecting 160 hectares of property in the islands. So if you're you have people you're working with who are interested in this, our Islands Trust Conservancy staff are very available to talk to people, find out if their property would be suitable, and work with them through every step of the process. So how you can help. I mean, you've joined us today to get more information and really equip yourself with that knowledge that you need when working in the Islands Trust area. So we're really grateful for you taking the time today. Please share our resources with your prospective buyers. We sometimes hear from folks that have been on the islands for a while that they didn't even know the Islands Trust existed. And of course, we're kind of a unique form of local government. So a lot of folks, even if they know we exist, they don't quite know what we do. So you can really help us out with that. As Sonja mentioned, we're very available. Our staff are always happy to meet with you, take an email, or talk to you over the phone if you've got questions coming up, or if you want to have some of these printed brochures. I'm happy to equip you with those. Um, and so in speaking with people about buying land in the Islands Trust area, really important to be learning about the types of sensitive ecosystems that we have on the islands and what folks can be thinking about in terms of protecting them. Talking about groundwater sensitivity that, a lot of properties rely on rainwater collection. Mention the work of the Islands Trust Conservancy and the opportunities there for people wanting to protect the natural land on their areas. You can follow us on social media and share our content. And of course, we always encourage folks to become habitat stewards, learn from some of the resources that we've got available and implement that on your own property where you live. This is just a screen grab of that web page that I've talked about. Big shout out to our communication specialist, Morgana, who put the finishing touches on this just this morning. This isn't publicly available yet because we're still building it out, but just to give you a sense, this is the sort of categories that we are thinking to put here. So we'll have planning support, all the sort of development, land use planning questions, stewardship resources, like I mentioned, mapping resources with a direct link to the MapIT application that Sonja gave us a tour of, and then information about the Islands Trust Conservancy. So I will share this again with the resource list, and would really welcome your feedback. If there are specific items or links, information you think should be on this webpage, please let us know, and we hope that you will use it and share it with your clients. So again, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, and thank you to Skylar and the Vancouver Island Real Estate Board for partnering with us to offer this webinar. Hope that this is the beginning of more opportunities. And of course, thank you so much to all of our presenters for today. So I think we've got a couple more questions that have come in. And I wonder, Skylar, if you've got the list in front of you, if you want to just read out the next one.
I do, yes. Bear with me here.
Sure.
Oh, thanks for your patience here. It looks like it closed on me.
Oh,
of course.
I've actually got it here in front of
you?
me.
Good.
Yeah. So Jason is saying, thank you for today's presentation. It'd be great to see a future Vancouver Island Real Estate Board session focused specifically on islands trust planning and real estate topics such as zoning, permitted uses, accessory dwellings, water, septic systems, and development approvals. Um, Absolutely. I think we're open to doing that. And I don't know, Sonja, if you're still on the call, if you wanted to give a very quick elevator pitch. I know that as you said before, folks are always welcome to come into the office or get in touch with us over email or phone if they've got specific questions.
In the absence of a planned date for that webinar, which will be a webinar all on its own, and I'd love to help with that, please call us and we can talk specifically about the island that you're talking about because it's different for each community. So if it's Gabriola versus Thetis versus Mudge, we can help really narrow in on the processes and the actual applications and timelines that are applicable for that geography. So please call, email, or better yet, come in and meet us in person at the front counter. We're really happy to see humans live.
Great.
The last question that I have here, if it wasn't addressed earlier, is from Susan. How do we find out if a property transfer or new landowner in the trust area? Do realtors need to request these packages to be sent out?
Yeah, so we work with an organization called LandCorp that's able to populate all the property transfers over a given period, and then our GIS staff works to um, find the addresses, the civic addresses linked with that. And so it is a bit of a process, but we do that kind of mail out quarterly. And absolutely, I would welcome individual agents to get in touch with me if you want to have some of these welcome packages that you can provide to people. And I can also, of course, provide the digital links. They're all on our website, but happy to email those as well. So I'll make sure my contact is in that resource list that gets shared. Great.
I believe
Well,
the other questions were discussed.
Great. Well, I think I'll leave it there. Again, our contact information will be shared, and thanks to everyone for taking the time to learn more about Islands Trust and the work that we're doing. Thank you to Erin, thank you to Travis, thank you to Sonja and Elder Geraldine, and of course all of the Islands Trust staff supporting behind the scenes as well. Hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Yes, the resource will be emailed out to everybody, hopefully tomorrow.
Awesome.
That's great.
Thanks very much, everyone. I appreciate your time.
Thanks.